Cool. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having this interview. I'm really excited about this, and I've considered you one of my mentors with everything that you do because of the fact that what you do, to me, you're more of like a healthy spiritual warrior, whereas you're out there and you're really challenging the corporations and you're challenging the consciousness of where most people are at. And I have a lot of people that go and follow this. My specialty is in men's confidence, especially in social interaction. So I'm very curious, and I kind of want to gear it towards that way because I know you have a lot of new books out. But I also understand that there's so much knowledge and health information to help people on all levels in regards to this. So please, just if you would like, in your own words, tell us a little bit about your center. And you are someone that absolutely you need to listen to. And go to YouTube and watch all the videos there because you have mountains of information. So, just want to open it up there where you can tell I'm a little excited here. So,
well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate what you said and spending time with you. And certainly a subject that I'm very rarely, if ever, asked to speak about, and that's our emotional and spiritual health, men. And we'll speak a little bit about Hippocrates. We were founded in 1956. With Anne Wigmore. Now, Anne was a resident of Boston, a European immigrant to the United States, and in 1952, at around 50 years old, was told that she had 3 months to live due to colon cancer, stage 4 cancer. And thank God she had the experience back in the village she grew up in with her surrogate grandmom and natural healing. The grandmom was the village doctor, and healed herself of this incredibly bad form of colon cancer. Said, I can't contain that, and opened our doors. And from that day forth, hundreds of thousands of people have come here from every corner of the globe. And what we do is we transform their lives along with them. Anne had a mantra that resonated with me, and I joined her staff in 1975. And she said, we help people to heal themselves. We do not heal people. We do not pretend to heal people. That we have to educate people and empower people and love people and support people. And by those actions, teach people to have self-respect. And when they have that, they can heal themselves. And that formula has worked. As you know, we've had tens of thousands of people reverse every known disease to man. Those of us who are fortunate enough to live this way, we just don't age the way the rest of the population does. And as you articulated early, maybe it gives me fuel for being a warrior of truth. And that's what turns me on. That's what impassions me. And the world so sorely needs it today. Everything is boiled down to commercialism and sales pitches, and it's all about money and all about advancement of things that don't matter, the shallow world we live in. And it's time we put the brakes on and come back to our senses and find what our fulfillment is and live our passions. And when we do that, we're going to be good. Now, we'll start and launch talking about men first by talking about women. Women who I have an infinity for, because I grew up in a household that was quite unique, with a father who loved my mother and respected my mother and treated her with grace and love and respect. And I watched that as a boy growing up, and it was quite a different experience than my colleagues and friends had. I would be in their homes visiting, and the abuse, both emotional and in some rare cases physical abuse, was evident. And I think that most women in the world have anticipated or expected that type of relationship from men. And sadly, we men have been molded and trained by our fathers, and often our fathers who didn't love and like themselves didn't love and like their wives, or love and have tenderness for their daughters. So we have this warped sense of who we are in our genders and a warped sense of who we are as people. I think that women need to speak with clarity and confidence and not pretend to be men. to accept our women as women and to allow them to be maternal and loving and tender the way they tend to be. And that's going to help move humanity forward. Men also have to realize that when we are attracted to a woman and we eventually may marry that woman, in a way we're looking for that image of a mother, or in my case, the mother I had. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. I always joke with my female friends and say, how many children do you have? If they say 3, I say, well, how about the husband? They said, okay, it's 4 too. So, and it's fine. You know, we're different. We're made up in a different way. Our psyches are different. Our brains are different. We're wired different. Our hormones are different. And that's perfectly fine. But I think where men should be looking today, at the beginning of the 21st century, is at the way that we should express ourselves. And the entrapments we had from the past. When I was a young guy, either you had to act like John Wayne or Clint Eastwood. And if you achieved that, everything was okay, even though it was pretense. And then all at once we had this wild guy that was a heterosexual jump into the picture called Baryshnikov. He completely threw everything off because this was not a manly thing. He was dancing and everything. And we started to see movement happen in our mythological image of malehood and masculinity probably about 40 to 50 years ago. And sadly, there wasn't a guiding light. The women had a movement, as ill-fated as it has been, and as unfulfilling as it in most cases has become. The men didn't have a movement. We don't express to one another our true feelings. I mean, I could be next to a guy that had his leg cut off, and I'd say, how are you? And he'd say, okay. And you know he's not okay. And this is part of why it's been more difficult to erode false imagery and put a further burden on we men to be something we're not. And it's time we shed that. Why not be who we are? Why not be authentic? Why not be completely, utterly honest? And I'm not saying be neurotic and run around and tell everyone your problems, and to be feminine, because you're not, in most cases, feminine. You're not going to express in the exact way that a woman would, but to be expressive and to be honest and to stand for something. You know, your values and virtues are who you are. At the end of the day, when you pass on, they're going to look back at what you have achieved, not on an economic basis, but on a social basis, on an emotional basis. And that all comes from value-driven lives. And what are your values? You know, I remember many years ago I had an opportunity to read the autobiography of Ben Franklin. And most Americans are naive. They think Thomas Jefferson did everything. He was sort of the stunning guy that looked hip. But it was really Ben Franklin that put this country together in the United States. And when he wrote, he said, you know, I had achieved so much and I got accolades and I was so incredibly endowed with fulfillment my whole life, but I realized I had certain virtues that I hadn't achieved. When I was a young man, I had these virtues and values I wanted, and I put them to the side to build my ego and to build a country. And he knew he was getting close to his death, and he lived longer than most people at that time in history, and didn't get a contagious disease which killed most people. And as he went through those last years and months of his life, achieved each and every one of those virtues. And what was beautiful about this, as he achieved his last, within about 2 days after that, he passed. Now, isn't that the kind of life that you and I want? A life that we drive, a life that we direct, a life that is worth something, that you feel confident about and proud about, not to enrich an ego, but to enrich your humanity, to enrich your sensibility and your sharing and your compassion. That's what a real man is. A real man is willing to be utterly transparent and totally honest at any time, no matter what it takes.
That's what I like to I preach and I tell guys, I say a lot of your power comes from your vulnerability. Your vulnerability to open up and to say your feelings and to understand that a grown man can cry. I don't want to
Yes.
say cry that often, but I would
No.
say, it's good to have that emotion. It's good to have the ability to walk down the street and not think that you need all these excess things to be the man, which is unfortunate in this society where you're looking at like the hip hop culture or the other cultures where you have to be a man in order to have this car and get this amount of women.
Exactly.
And I do teach about dating and social concepts, but I never said that, the more women you have, the more man you are. I believe, there's so many different types of men in the world. There's some that are monogamous, there's some that aren't. But it's the ability just to open up, be free, to express yourself, be okay with helping your brother out, and things to this nature. And I think that's a big part of it. And with the vulnerability and the transparency, there's a deeper strength in, and I would also say fulfillment in that type of living. To be able to, walk down the street. For example, I'm a big guy. I'm about 240, worked out, played middle linebacker, yet I was in the show choir. I have a Yorkie poo and a Maltese dog. I love to garden. Thanks to you, I have a wonderful garden. And I do these things, and it's okay. I'm not trying to fluff my chivo up
Exactly.
and be a man.
Exactly.
And I'm more of a man.
And let me tell you,
yeah.
and you'll be much more attractive to real women, at least women of value.
Real women, that's perfect.
Real women. I mean, real people attract real people. Birds of a feather flock together. I mean, I watch women over the years, and when a man becomes candid, you melt their hearts.
Absolutely.
Because believe me, it's a rarity with we men.
Absolutely.
And why not be who you are? And the fact of the matter is, can you imagine how much energy even you and I have spent in our past propping ourselves up to the false image? The energy that we took for that. Can you imagine if we expressed that in different ways? Well, it would have been remarkable. I think we could have changed the world. If men put their mind to sincerity and honesty, we would really become a totally different planet than we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember when I was in high school, I was so driven. I wasn't a great-looking kid, but I remember I worked out to use my body as my self-esteem at that point in time, which a lot of guys are doing at this point in time. And I remember it would be 50 degrees out and I'd be wearing a tank top. And I look back now and I just go, what am I doing? That was just absolute asinine. I must have looked insecure, thinking that my muscles were the source of my masculinity. And speaking of which, coming to working out, in your book, Supplements Exposed, which is amazing to me. I mean, I must have wasted thousands of dollars on supplements. Can you get into that aspect?
Not only wasted it, wasted your health.
Absolutely. And to this day, I'm still a little bit confused about this because there's so much stuff out there. I don't know what's whole food, what's bioavailable. But I'm looking at all my supplements. I'm like, I don't even know where to start. But can you touch on that a little bit about what I read in your book, Supplements Exposed, about all these chemicals that men are using to get bigger and stronger, and the protein powders? And I'm going to go off a little bit here because you told me about the whey protein and how it affects your kidneys, and now I've gone to a pea protein. Hopefully that's better. And the energy drinks and the barrage of information guys are getting, bodybuilders, guys that are working out, saying you need 2 grams of protein per body weight to get big. Yet I'm hearing that you don't need that much. All you need is enough that gets the slough skin and replace the nails, like maybe 60 grams. And it's so confusing to so many men out there. I mean, like I said, I just kind of want to open it up there, and maybe you can shed some light on this whole aspect of it.
We go back to what we addressed early on, that what drives the world today and our culture is economics. And it's no different with the bodybuilding or the health food industry, sadly. And it's become evident that there's a lot of money in this. So you have people who have very little experience, very little knowledge, who are willing to purport the same old story over and over again. And it really hasn't changed in bodybuilding much since the 50s. We've added extra products into it, but that's about it. Now, the concept that the human body requires massive protein has not only been debunked, but been shown to be one of the major and central causes of all basic diseases, everything from cancer to diabetes to cardiovascular disease. Back in 1954, Dr. Harmon at the University of Nebraska taught us something that still stands today, that how we prematurely age and how we get disease is through free radicals. But it was only recently we realized how free radicals really occur. It's high protein and high sugar diets. What is a Western diet today? High protein and high sugar. And what happens, and I'll try to give you a visual picture of this, all the listeners, is when you take the structure of a protein and the structure of a sugar, when these two come together, they disband, and they sort of open up and mutate and become a different structure. Those structures are so abnormal to the human body that the immune system starts to attack it, and it attracts in free radicals because it kills cells. And when you kill the flesh part of the cell, what's left is the electric in the cell, and that electric is what a free radical is. So the cause of all disease and the cause of all premature aging is high protein diets with high sugar. You look at, for instance, a whey protein, which is a waste product, which should be outlawed, but in fact, rather than lose money on discarding that, because it's illegal to dump that if you're a dairy, they put it into containers and tell bodybuilders it's a great source of protein. It not only has whey in it, which is massive amounts of protein, but it also has sugars in it. It has chemicals in it. You know, there's a few companies, maybe not, but 98% of them have chemicals and sugar in it. So now you have one-stop shopping to get cancer and every other disease. When we look at bodybuilders, they used to show up here rarely and occasionally 30, 40 years ago with a kidney problem. Now, every other week, I'm working with a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old who actually has kidney failure in their future because they've been taking things like whey protein and taking 2 grams of protein for every. This is outrageous. This is like saying, I want a drink of water, and they create a tsunami to give you the water. It's outrageous. I'm a bodybuilder. I train Olympic athletes. Some of the top, I won't name names, but some of the top names in the world come here. And every one of them, over the 40 years I've done this work, has said the same thing. You're telling me the opposite of what I've been told. I have a better strength, bigger muscles, better endurance, not tired, not in pain. Why? Because the human body was built to eat plant-based diets, period. Now let's flip the page on this. Meat consumption, which I was taught as a boy, that if you don't eat copious amounts of meat, and especially in my generation, red meat, you're not male-like, you're not masculine. And I remember when I made a conscious decision to become a vegetarian and then shortly after a vegan, even though I'm a flaming heterosexual, I even questioned my own sexuality for a minute. That's how ingrained this is in your head. Now what's ironic, as time passed and I learned more, you actually become more feminine. Men become more feminine by eating meat. And today more than ever, because what do they inject into the steer? What do they inject into the chicken? How do they grow the fish? It's hormones and steroids. It's all about poundage. They're not selling the cutest cow to eat. They're selling the cow that basically has the most weight on it. And how they get that weight on it is inject it with ungodly stuff that literally feminizes you.
Now, is this the reason why in the last, let's say, 18 years they found by studies, and this is just what I've read, is that the men's testosterone on average is dropping about 1%, I think, per year, and men are becoming feminized, which men's puberties are hitting younger, women's menstrual cycles are hitting younger, and this all has to do with pretty much the chemicals in the meats and the poultries and things to this nature, right?
You hit it. This is the central cause. There are other causes: air pollution, water pollution, clothing, polyester, nylons. But the overwhelming reason that we're dropping 1% a year is exactly what we're addressing now. Dairy food. Dairy food has even more ungodly hormones in it. And they permanently impregnate the poor dairy cows. And when they first created the hormone and then had the unscrupulous governments around the world approve it, they didn't realize it was going to create a secondary problem of pus, mucus. And they had to rapidly develop units that take and scrape or push the mucus off the milk. So every major dairy now that impregnates these poor cows, this feminizes men more than even the meat, which feminizes men. Wow. So ironically, here we're being told that you become more male-like and you're becoming more feminine. And ironically, when women consume this, they become more masculine, because when they have more female hormones, their body to compensate, produces testosterone in their body. For the first time in human history, the statistic now is frightening. We have 2.5% more females being born than males. And we anticipate by the year 2025, it will be 4 to 5%. That's how rapidly the decrease in male population is becoming. If you think about what we're discussing today, this should not be an isolated discussion on your website or in lectures I do. This should be front page news. This should be what we're mono-focused on now. The statistics are not only frightening but alarming. If you look at the government back before Christmas last year, they came out with a study that even stunned me, that our babies below 5, the infants and babies below 5, now the number one killer is brain cancer. If 41 years ago when I began the work, if I had heard of a child in Europe with brain cancer, I most likely would have liked to go and see the child. That's how odd it would have been. Our youth below 18, boy, girl, below 18, other than accidents, obviously number one killer, is brain cancer and leukemia. And these are recent phenomena. This is the last generation we're talking about. You look at the use of cell phones, you look at the use of laptop computers, wireless technology. These are contributors. You have compromise and moderation. So you have different levels of education and socioeconomics. So I talk to educated people with money. They say, well, we don't eat meat anymore. We eat fish. The last book I wrote, you may know, is called Killer Fish. If you wanted to get somebody sick, feeding hamburgers is a good way, but feeding them fish is even better. And when I walk into writing a book, obviously I know enough about a subject I can write the book. But I have an assistant that's a research phenomenon. Whenever I think I found the worst information you can find, he comes back with 2 or 3 things that shock me.
That's pretty scary, because I'll tell you right now, you're the most eloquent person I know. Like I said, I was just having a conversation with you because I've listened to you go off on subjects, and I'm just, this man is just a powerhouse in his ability. And I think the other day, went over for Mother's Day. My parents, they've been married about 50 years too, and I understand where you're coming from. And they're like, we're going to have tilapia, and I know how you feel about tilapia, yes, with higher omega-6s. And and I'm completely raw. I'm completely raw. I juice absolutely my own garden stuff. And I was trying to have that conversation with them, and I was talking, and all my information comes from you. I'm like, hey, if a fish is dead after 30 minutes, it begins to develop lipid peroxides, which is a carcinogen, and you're ingesting it as far as your fish oils that you're taking. And the tilapia is raised in fish farms, which you've talked about, and and I can't. Like I said, you can lead a horse to water, but I can't make them eat.
I know.
Or
Look,
drink.
my mom is dead because of that. My mom could have moved here to Hippocrates, and God bless her soul, she's dead because she was addicted. And people don't realize that we're not just liking food and the taste of food, we're addicted to it. Absolutely. Now, let me get off track a minute, then I'm going to come back to the tilapia. About 2 years ago, I was coming on a stage to speak as our former head of the Food and Drug Administration was coming off, Dr. David Kessler. And I said to David Kessler, who, by the way, I didn't have an awful lot of respect for, running the Food and Drug Administration, what have you been doing? How come you retired for small talk early? He said, I couldn't take another day when it was suggested to me that after I retire, I will make a consulting fee of $1 million or $2 million a year. Just remember that, David, as we're trying to approve the latest drug or the latest chemical. He said I couldn't take it anymore. So he had integrity. So I warmed up to him. I said, what have you been doing? He said, well, I had to pick one subject. And when you get to be a guy my age, when I was younger, I used to think I could do everything well. Now you realize to do anything well, you have to pick one subject at a time. He picked a good one. He picked childhood obesity. And he realized that what will destroy this nation and other nations worldwide more effectively and rapidly than anything is obesity. If you think we're sick today, you wait. With the generation that's coming up, where 70% of them are overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. So he said, when I started to investigate it, he said, I realized that food having sugars, fats, and salts are addictive. He said, but what I unveiled was very surprising. I said, what was that? He stunned me. I could hardly talk when I got up on the stage. He said, I found out that every major food industry on the planet Earth, I said, General Food? He said, yeah, have chemists that their entire job, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, is to create synthetic opiates. I said, they're not illegal? He said, no. He said, opiates are illegal, but chemically created synthetics are not illegal, that they put into all of the foods. So why your poor parents eat this way, and I ate that way at one point, and maybe back in my generation they didn't do it, but today they are. They're putting drugs into your food that you, your children, your friends, your loved ones are being addicted to. Now let's go back to your parents. Most people, when you say fish, instantaneously say it's good for the heart. Let me point out, now you know this, but we'll talk about it for the listeners, that the fish that your parents are eating is the most common fish. We've almost fished out all other species. This is an easy one to grow, a rapid one to grow in factory farms. And what they do on these factory farms, fish farms, is put thousands and thousands of fish where dozens of fish should be. And that's a literal statement, thousands where dozens should be. They are inhaling through their gills feces, and to keep them alive, they have to pour consistent large amounts of antibiotics in. The fish, like salmon, are so anemic that they actually have to paint them pink when they come out. And there's no laws anywhere in the world that we know of that govern you fudging it. So people may be told eating at a fish restaurant in the United States or Europe, you're eating northern water Alaskan salmon caught by the Eskimo in their bare hands, where it was really from a factory farm in China, because more than half the fish in the world come from uncontrolled factory farms in China. Now, the fish that's most popular has 11 times more omega-6 than one-time omega-3. 11 times omega-6, one-time omega-3. Most fish oil is made from this. And what they've discovered, two places I'll speak about, there were many others, University of Michigan, is that people who took this fish oil made from this particular type of fish had double the amount of colon cancer. The Finnish study on hundreds of thousands of men, hundreds of thousands, we're not talking one or two, it's rare you see a study with that population, show that men who ate fish literally had 2 to 3 times more heart attacks and strokes than men who ate little to no fish. Now, how is it that we know this? How is it I report this from university and nation studies, and you still hear from your alternative holistic doctor who has no gazoons that fish oil is a great thing because he read it in the latest medical holistic doctor journal? This is bizarre. And we've got to start standing for the truth and speaking the truth and only accepting the truth. As you know, one of my projects for the last 2 years, I created with a colleague a website called therealtruthabout.health.com. So far, they've recorded me on 100 hours of different subjects. We have a march going. We want this to be the most relevant, up-to-date, and truthful website on the issue of human health that's ever existed. And it's not just going to be Brian Clement. We're going to bring leaders in. We're going to talk to environmental leaders. We're going to talk to other health leaders. People we know are coming from the heart, not from the head, not from the pocketbook, but from compassion. And this is the team we have to get together now. The real war today is not a violent war. It's a war for the minds and the hearts of people. And we're going to win that war because the bastards out there are not leading you in the right direction. And you've got to get clean. You've got to realize you have an addiction to the foods, not only from what I've just said, you have a social, a cultural pattern to these foods, that although you think you're man-like, you're masculine, that you're an independent thinker, I'll show you that you're not. I'll show you that most of you are followers, most of you are pretenders, most of you are acting out what you think you should be rather than being who you are. And if you put all of this together, it only provokes one thing. Damn it, I've got to change. And change is hard. You know, believe me, it wasn't easy for me to go from a big fat guy to a guy that was willing to do this. And it didn't take a day. It took a long time. And I just had to do it. It wasn't I wanted to do it. I had to do it. And that's where you've got to go. You know, in the early days, to be candid with you, I knew that the mind had a major role in making me eat right, making me want to. I never exercised in my life, by the way. I was an anti-jock when I was a kid. You were an athlete. I wasn't. I was a musician.
From that question, I heard a comment that someone said if you are not exercising in this day and age, you might as well be taking a depressive pill.
You got it. The latest book that will show that to you is one from a wonderful guy out of Harvard called Dr. Rattay. He's a professor of psychology there, and it's called Spark. Anyone out there listening to us, get that book, Spark, and you should have him on your show, by the way. But Spark is bringing you up to speed on the latest evidential science, empirical research on exercise. I'll give you one story as an example. They looked at people with the diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, which is BS. There's no disease called attention deficit disorder. And they got them on a treadmill and exercised them for 1 hour, then reshot the MRI. Not one of them out of hundreds they tested had the symptoms or the example that their brain still had attention deficit disorder. Does that mean a lack of exercise could create that kind of lethargia and melancholy? The answer is yes. Here at Hippocrates, as soon as I got hip to exercise, which was 35 years ago, and I'll tell you why I did, my manhood was challenged. Every time I needed to open the drawer of my desk in Boston, I had to get my assistant, a female, to come in and do it. So I said, hey, something's wrong with that. Sure, I eat good food, but... So I forced myself through ego to get into a gym, and for the first 2 months I thought, gee, I'm going to die. I felt things I never felt in my life. And I mean, virtually I'd never exercised before. I was a drummer. I worked my way through school with that. So I guess that was exercise. And I smoked grass, so I used to lift my arms here and cigarettes over here. But that was about the level of it.
Get a little stronger these days. They have bongs. They have big glass bongs these days.
Yeah, I'd really have big muscle at that point. But what ends up happening is now it's 3 months into it, I became addicted. I don't ever go anywhere in the world that I don't exercise. About 15 years ago, I got smart enough that I said, look, I will go anywhere in the world and speak. But if I can't find a gym and a sauna, I don't do it. I take a gym, 6 days, 7 days a week when I'm out traveling. I'm doing aerobic at least an hour, almost always, sometimes shorter, but at least an hour, 6 days a week, and lifting weights for 3 hours, 3 days a week. And that's religion to me. And if you're not doing that, you're going to become melancholy. Your brain is not going to function the way it should. And eating a pure plant-based diet is important, but equally important is exercising aerobically and weightlifting. We now know that when you develop muscle and keep muscle, even as you age, you'll have 3 times less degradation or breakdown of hormones. So you're going to be more sexual, you're going to be more mental, even into your 90s and beyond, if you have muscle. And what's fun for me here in Florida, there's a lot of my friends at the gym are in their 80s and 90s. And it's great to watch these men and women there. And it's fantastic. And I've learned a lot from them. They've been in gyms before I was born, most of them. Yeah. I basically go in there and they show me what not to do and what to do.
And speaking of working out, that is pretty much the number one benefit for helping osteoporosis, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. There's no other way to do it, by the way. I've worked with 20,000 women and a few men in that. And by the way, you do not get rid of osteoporosis or prevent it unless you're weightlifting. Anyone that tells you a pill is going to do that, they're lying to you, and it's a sales pitch. I've tried everything. I've tried the diets. This is the most impeccable diet, but it's not going to build your muscle, and it's not going to build your bones. Weightlifting is what does that.
Yeah, and it's important to say, because I floundered. It's taken me probably 4 years to get to the point that I'm at. And I did a 40-day fast. I went off of it. I went plant-based, and then I just went back to meat. And then I went back and forth. And there was days where, then I went to coffee and trying to find that. So I think it's important to let guys understand that it does take a while to acclimate to that place. But when you get to the point where it's almost like this unconscious competence is when you start to really understand what it's about and the balance of not trying to force it all in at one time and things to that nature. Do you find that a lot of people that it's such a huge shock to their system? Is there any one way of really helping a person kind of ease into this lifestyle?
Well, You said a lot that I liked. Unconscious competence is what we come to. It's not that it's all effort and all perseverance. And I think it's very good and wise, you pointed out, that it's not a straight line. That when people come here dying of cancer, and we have two kinds of people that come to Hippocrates, really healthy, smart people who come to prevent disease, and really sick people, and some moderate sick people. We understand that they're going to have the same struggle you had and I had. Now, the day I gave meat up, I gave it up, because if I had gone back to it, I probably would have never changed again. I loved meat the day I gave it up. It wasn't I didn't like it. I loved it. I used to fry it in butter. It wasn't good enough. And so that I gave up. But my biggest struggle was a dairy food. So I'd be good, and then when I got a little emotional and a little insecure, I'd go and eat a gallon of ice cream. And can expect those things. Now, there's, again, two areas we'd like to speak about. There's some of you listening that has a major disease at this point. You may have cancer, may be advanced. You may have multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's disease, HIV. You've got to get on the horse and learn how to ride the horse, even if you're not a cowboy. You've got to learn how to ride that horse. And even in your cases, when it's your life is on the line, you're probably going to fall off the horse, but you've got to be man enough to dust yourself off and get your ass back on that and keep going to the sun. All of us are going to do it. The other group of people we're going to talk to now is a majority listening. You have a grace period, and I had to learn this in France. We had a guy that came to us 25 years ago, was going to die of AIDS, reversed it, went back to France, and wrote in French for the French-speaking community all about his healing and raw food and living food. So I was in Paris speaking about 20 years ago, and I was doing my American shtick, you know, like Americans, you got to do this, and if you don't do it, you're going to croak and all this shit. And after it, he came over to me, and he said, what you said is absolutely correct. How you said it is absolutely wrong. And he taught me something. He said, in a country like France, continue to say what you said, but before it, preface it by saying this is a possibility. For the listeners out there, this is a possibility. What we're talking about, this is a possibility for you. And in the case of Dr. Clement and Hippocrates, we've watched thousands, hundreds of thousands of people change their life, reverse disease, and remain young. So that's a possibility. If you could take 8% to 10% of bad food, bad habits, lack of exercise, negative thinking out of your life every month, in 1 year, you will have transformed to a healthy lifestyle. Let's say you're a really lazy bastard like I used to be. Let's just take 5% out a month and look at it logically. So if you know meat is bad, but you're not ready to give meat up eminently today, you give up the worst of meat. So you give up my old favorites, salami, bologna, pastrami, hot dogs, sausage. They're the worst. These have nitrates in them. They cause cancer even more than other things, etc. Now, you're going to be surprised about the second. So that may take 6 months for you to do. The second is not red meat first, as bad as it is. It's chicken. Look at the work of Dr. Virginia Livingston, half a century. She showed us that chickens, 95% of them have a leukemic virus in it. Even after it's cooked, it transfers into the human body and can create every kind of cancer you can imagine. So chicken goes, and then fish goes. And if you're stuck on meat after a year or close to a year, eat the red meat, and then give yourself 2, 3, 4 months to get rid of that. Now, if you're not ready to give it up completely, there's now meat and fish substitutes. Now, these are not healthy foods. Most are made out of crappy things. But are they better than nitrate-ridden animal fat? You bet your butt. And I would have been on them if I had them in the day I started this. And so they make chicken substitutes and fish substitutes. And so that may be your parachute, as I say. Now let's look at dairy. Simultaneously, when we're giving meat up, it would be good to give dairy up. Which are the worst for you? Worst are the ones my old favorites. Ice cream, whipped cream. I used to take ice cream and put whipped cream on it. The only good thing was the red dyed cherry on the top of it. So they go first. You know, heavy creams, they go first. Number 2, milk goes. Milk goes. You know, I'm currently writing a book, be out next year, called Dairy Death. You ought to see the latest research on this. We've had to actually break down cancer to 2 or 3 chapters because there's such extraordinary amounts of data and information I've got to put in there. But the milk goes. And then, not that yogurt's good for you, but at least it's fermented. That would be the last thing that goes. So within a year, you get rid of all of that, say now. Now you get rid of the animal fat. Most listeners don't realize you get more animal fat from dairy food generally than you get even if you're a big meat eater like I used to be, because you're eating more dairy food. You know, you have 2-3 kinds of meats, and maybe you eat them once or twice a day, where I used to eat dairy food all day long, starting with milk in the morning, yogurt, ice cream, cheese. All of this stuff just goes one at a time. And cheese should go out, by the way, in the very first list. Cheese is a lot of condensed fat in cheese. Now, let's talk about raw food versus cooked food. Let's talk about organic food versus non-organic food. Number one, you may say, I'm not ready for organic food. I'm not ready for raw food. Okay, let's start with that. As you're giving up,
right there. Here's a big thing that I get, because I deal with a lot of guys that don't have a lot of money, and organic food's a lot more expensive than the other. Is there some kind of way, and even for myself, I go to the store and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I want to get 7 red peppers to juice. Is there a way to get the pesticide off, or are we just are we just losing a losing battle? I mean, that's very confusing.
It's a losing battle. 50 years ago, when they started to employ, I should say, pesticides, you could get it off. So when Norman Walker 70 years ago wrote his book, you could wash it off. They'd spray it the last week or two. Now they spray the seed, they spray the ground. There's fungicides, herbicides. It's in the cell structure of the food. But here's what my thought are. Common foods that are not terribly sprayed, red peppers are, so you avoid those, or things like asparagus. Even though they may spray a bit, avocados, not the end of the world if you eat a non-organic avocado. The things that are most highly sprayed are the cabbage family, red peppers, squashes.
You're killing me right now, because you know I make my own sauerkraut of that and red peppers. You know, and I'm thinking that I'm pretty healthy.
here's a lot of you live in parts of the world where, at least for the summertime, you can go to an organic market, you know, a street market, a farmer's market. The rest of the year, as we had to do, we were relegated to do this decades ago. You couldn't buy organic food. In major cities, New York, London, France, maybe you could. A little bit, but it was carrots, apples, cabbage, period. Grow sprouts. You can get seeds everywhere in the world, raw seeds, nuts, grains, beans, and in a matter of minutes, over a period of a couple of days, 3-4 days, you can grow the most rich, nutritious, organic food on the planet Earth. Remember, a sprout, which is major protein, major vitamins, major minerals, essential fatty acids, has 10 to 30 times more nutrition than the best organic vegetable from your backyard. So in a snowstorm in Helsinki in the middle of January, you can have a garden in your kitchen. And this stuff is a lifesaver. It also has the most phytochemicals that prevent diseases and help to reverse diseases, as well as premature aging. So there are easy ways. I was poor as a dirt poor when I started this. My first wheatgrass juicer was a meat grinder I bought for $5 at a yard sale. You know, so that's how you do it. And you know, slowly but surely you come. Now, once you do this, and once you start to abandon the non-organic foods and eat organic food and eat less, you're going to start to realize that with this high nutritious food, which you know, but the listener may not know, you're going to require less food because you're going to be substantially nourished by this. If you eat a Hippocrates diet, this is the highest protein diet in the world. But the difference between meat protein and this is what your body cell doesn't burn up and utilize, you urinate or feces out. So it never sticks in the body and breaks down the kidneys and feeds disease. These are pre-digested proteins, where animal-based proteins stick there for 3 days. Meat, fish, chicken, red meat, pork, 3 days it sticks in the body. And where what you're eating, I'm positive, you're getting probably 10 times, 20 times more protein that absorbs in your body than you did back when you ate a lot of meat and dairy food.
Yeah.
And so these are easy things to understand.
Okay. here's a interesting point, and just to go back, because I like to do spoken word. Is this pretty accurate? The spoken word. This is one of the things I like to say is, I say doctors trip. What's their deal? Drugs that heal will be concealed. People wasting soon away. Why? Because they could not pay. Money don't mean shit. What are you, a frickin' hypocrite? Extinct perfection soon to be, living lies like they cannot see. Cannot see. Cannot see. They don't care about you or me. We're puppets to be, dumbfounded rats. Ignorant ones as blinded bats. So as we sit and we wait, they're concocting the perfect bait. Is that accurate?
More than accurate. Boy, you've got to write that down and send it to me. You've got to write it down and send it to me. I'll post that. I'll post that for you. It's very accurate. And we'll go back in. So when I'm sitting with young people, which I have literally hundreds of times over my work life, who are going to go into medicine, I encourage them. And why? Because these are people who I know have an interest, if not a great interest, in the work we've done here, and have a great potential to come out of medical school and be good doctors who are helping people in sensible ways, responsible ways. So the idea we have, that I used to have, which was wrong, that the doctor is a bad guy, I'm going to expose is not true. They go in to help people. That's where their heart is. They may have had a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a cousin die, and they're bright enough and courageous enough to say, I'm going to go to school 12 years and get a credential for this. Now, when they go into medical school, very few know that the education in medical schools is 50%, one half paid for, by the pharmaceutical industry. So in spite of the fact you may learn some very important things, organic chemistry, biochemistry, anatomy, physiology, the overlying or overlay of it is prescription drugs. So when these industries of the pharmaceutical come together and support the medical education, it's for one purpose, and that's to have the doctor, no matter what specialty she or he gets into, become a glorified pharmacist. And sadly, this poor young person who's now in their mid to late 20s and is about ready to graduate medical school, go through residency. And residency is a place where they break the horse, as I was told by a dean at Harvard one time. They keep these poor kids up 2-3 days on the front line of an emergency room that often gets them to be adherent, let's put it that way. And they get out, and they really want to help people. I'm not saying that at that point they are, because they're still bright eye and bushy tail. And unless they're completely conscious people, within 5 years, it's going to take them to realize that what they're doing in most cases doesn't help, that it hinders and it hurts. Now, there are exceptions. There's ER doctors. All of us who call ourselves doctors are frankly frauds other than an ER doctor. They're on the front line saving lives every day. They do heroic stuff, and I stand up and congratulate them. I salute those people. They're heroic to me. But if you look at things like oncology, where they fail 93% of the time, or orthopedic surgery, where they fail 90% of the time, what are we doing with that? If the answer is only prescription, if psychiatrists that are medical doctors, by the way, that have an extra education on the brain and how it functions, if their only answer to you is no longer discussing your problem but writing a drug prescription, and they're so effective at that now, the number one drug prescribed worldwide are antidepressants now. And so they have the people who have no values, have no virtues, who are lost or confused, unfulfilled, all thinking that they're crazy enough that they need a pharmaceutical drug. And it's sort of it's a legal way to go and get dope rather than buy it on the street to sedate yourself. So I'm not against the doctors. I'm against the system and the governments that allow the system of the pharmaceuticals to manipulate the public on a worldwide basis to think that this is legitimate medicine and that everything else that's really traditional medicine is not as good, not as important. Most Anglos listening to me today and Westerners listening to me today, they don't realize that 80% of the world's population today, the only medicine they take is herbal medicine. They don't realize that the United States of America is number one in some things still, not much, but we are number one in consuming pharmaceutical drugs. That the number one country, and we consume per capita 2 times more than the next country, Germany, in pharmaceutical drugs. That we have allowed almost 3 million of our infant and babies and children, the ones we're supposed to be protecting, to be put on cocaine drugs called Ritalin. Ritalin is a cocaine derivative for a disease that doesn't exist called attention deficit disorder. There was a film made that I got to see, a documentary on psychiatric medicine that was really funny, sad but funny. They went to a major psychiatric convention where all the psychiatrists and psychologists around the world who have names came. In Los Angeles, I guess it was 8-10 years ago. And they grabbed some of the big names, none of which I knew, one or two maybe, and they interviewed them right in front of the conference center. And they said, is psychiatric medicine an art or a science? Every one of them said an art. And they said, in your book where you have 370 different psychiatric disorders, is there any definitive way that you can diagnose these? 100% of them said no, because there's not. It's not like a blood test the medical doctor looks at and says, hey, you have a problem here. There's no way. So what we're saying is people who gravitate towards psychiatric medicine to begin with generally have a lot of issues. You know, this is a judgment statement, but it's just what I've seen over my lifetime. Number two, you're putting in the hands of people who probably have a lot of questions in their own mind your future. And their answer is no longer to talk to you to resolve your issues, what happened to you at one point. Their answer is to write a prescription and give it to you. And they are the #1 sales of drugs now in the world. Wake up, people. Yeah. If you are men out there listening to us, become a man. Don't become a wimp, a little boy, a wussy, and sit back and take all of this stuff and tell me how macho and secure you are. You're a wussy. You're a wussy if you're manipulated by these people. Take charge of your life. If your great-grandparents, who were probably plowing fields 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, saw you, they'd probably smack you in the back of the head and say, wake up.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you know, I know your time's about up, and I want to wrap up with this just because I've seen the progression over the years. And in my viewpoint of you, maybe 5 years ago, some of the videos on YouTube, and thank God for YouTube, you know, that you're kind of really pushing a smaller crowd. I saw a new video out, I would think you were talking about at the Mila convention, and it was beautifully done. And now you're really, really speaking out. Like, now we're talking global stuff. And the one thing that really hit hard for me, when you were talking about almost the death of the sea at year 2048, because of the overfishing and the oxygen. You say that we get 70% of the oxygen from the sea. And so we're looking at a massive catastrophe and that's happening. And if anyone has kids, and a lot of the people, that the generation that are in control of the corporation, it's just, you know, it's not only evil the way I look at it, it's just asinine to think that, you know, this is the type of role model that you're producing. Like that generation has failed miserably in my ability, except for a few people that are really standing up, and hopefully that we get the message through people like you who are standing up and saying these things that is absolutely true to bring it up, because it's scary.
It's scary. It really is. You know, I'm a guy who, as much as I expose the negative and the truth, I'm an optimist, and I think humanity has the strength, the spiritual increment, and the power within us to come back. And I've seen it time and time again. You know, you've seen it in times of horror. You know, New York City after 9/11, London after bombing, the Second World War. Can you imagine what those countries were like? Devastated. They rebuilt them. So I think we have it in us. But I think what is happening now is you have a consciousness revolution occurring on a global basis. And it was a small group of people before, but I would render to believe now, because I'm conservative on the number, that we have approximately 12% of the population that I've touched, spend time with on a global basis, who are now truth seekers, truth livers, conscious individuals. What we know from the statisticians and the economic geniuses is we need 17 to 18% to tip everything. We don't need 51% of the public to say we're going to get it, because most people are sheeps and followers. All we need is committed people, 17 or 18%. This, to me, is achievable in the next generation. The next generation, this will happen. And I listen to my children. You know, I have children from one teenager to children in their 30s. They don't get their news on the television anymore. They don't believe what they hear anymore. Not that they're pessimists, they're realist. The difference between past generations, we were so manipulated, we believed the dispensed information we were getting. They don't believe that anymore. My children don't understand issues like black and white, gay and straight. They don't understand these issues. If you even discuss these things with them, they get offended by it. So they are standing for truth. We're not talking about a generation that there's a handful of them that are a little bit more conscious, as my generation. Sure, the hippies were a little bit more conscious, but a lot of them went south anyway. You know, they went south, they got doped up, or they went into the corporations and became part of the problem. But the fact of the matter is, I don't see that with these kids. They're not tolerating the crap. Now, they're obviously being manipulated by the industries, and the technological industries manipulating them. That's why they get babies with these little play games on them. But the fact of the matter is, it's backfired, because the internet's a liberator. And the internet is liberating these kids, and they sit and talk to people from China. You were told Chinese people were bad people, Russian people were bad people. We didn't know any better. We didn't have any way to talk to these people. They're talking to these people. So I believe very soon, in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to have a major consciousness shift on the planet. It's already happening, that we see major healthy trends in this, and that people are going to come back again. We will find ways. If we took the minds that we're wasting on creating nonsense products and sabotaging your food so you can buy more of that junk food, and put those great minds, those brilliant minds, on saving planet Earth and bringing humanity back, with one fell swoop, it's going to happen. And I believe it's happening. I see it happening. I see people out there on the front lines of this. And I'm happy to be part of that. I'm happy to be alive in this period of history.
Yeah, I'm happy to be alive and doing it as well. You know, with that, like I said, I know your time's valuable. I had so many questions, and it's just wonderful to hear you talk on that. So, you know, that's just going to have to go on the wayside. But and this is just to you. If I send you, I have some gifts that I'd like to send to you that I think you'll enjoy. Could I just send them to the center with your attention, your name on them?
Absolutely. I'd love to do it. We'll do it again sometime, you know, schedule long out in advance, and I'll see you. I don't know where all the listeners are, but I'll be out traveling as always. I'll be in Europe very soon. I'll be for 2.5 weeks in 8 countries in Europe. The end of this week, as a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm leaving for northern Florida. I'll be in Austin, Texas next Wednesday night speaking. Shortly after that, in July, I'll be in the northwest part from Vancouver down to Oregon. Then after that, I'm going to be up in Canada and Detroit and Chicago. And so I'll be in your part of the world. I just got back a few days ago from New York. Yeah. God bless you all. Just keep your chin up and become participatory members of the human race.
And one more time, what's the name of that new website? I didn't even know about that new website. I'm getting all my stuff from YouTube, but I would love to go there and just absorb more information.
TheRealTruthAboutHealth.com.
Cool.
TheRealTruthAboutHealth.com. Take care of yourself, buddy, and keep up your good work.
Thank you, Brian, and I appreciate it, and have a wonderful day in life.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.